Stanley Kubrick's 1971 cult classic, A Clockwork Orange, is a dystopian science fiction film based on the novel written by Anthony Burgess. The plot is set in a futuristic dystopian Britain and follows Alex DeLarge and his ne'er-do-well gang of so-called droogs as they engage in sprees of ultraviolence, ranging from assaulting the elderly to robbing and raping innocent people. By all means, the characters we are presented with in the beginning of the movie are morally abominable and should be viewed as loathsome, despicable villains. Contrarily, however, Malcolm McDowell portrays Alex with a certain charm and culture, with his passion for Ludwig van Beethoven and a vocabulary composed of a combination of English and Russian. Despite his abhorrent actions, we see a side of Alex that shows a well-spoken and polished young man from a nice family. That is, when he's not engaging in ultraviolent acts. Alex's positioning as the narrator of the film also contributes to this counterintuitive fondness that many viewers describe feeling toward the character. Based on his interactions with his parents and somewhat sketchy probation officer, we can assume that it's this demeanor that has allowed Alex to get away with his criminal activity in the past and remain relatively unscathed. However, this veneer of being a changed man begins to fade away as more is revealed about Alex's abusive treatment of his droogs, and eventually fed up with his aggressive leadership, the gang sets up a robbery attempt gone wrong, and when the police arrive, they sabotage Alex and leave him to be caught in the act. After it is revealed that the woman who Alex and the droogs were attempting to rob ended up dying from the incident, Alex is sentenced to 14 years for his crimes. However, after only 2 years in prison, he learns about a state-sponsored psychological testing that is supposed to fix criminals, known as the Ludovico technique. Upon mentioning the treatment to the prison's priest, questions are immediately raised about the ethics of the treatment.
The question is whether or not this technique really makes a man good. Goodness comes from within. Goodness is chosen. When a man cannot choose, he ceases to be a man.
However, despite the concerns, Alex is selected to undergo the treatment, which entails watching violent films under the influence of a specially developed drug while being unable to move or blink, so as to form a Pavlovian association between the discomfort and criminal behavior. Incidentally, one of the films that Alex was subjected to had Beethoven's Ninth Symphony as the background score, to which Alex reacts less than favorably.
Stop it, please, I beg you! It's a sin! 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 It's a sin!
Sin? What's all this about sin?
That! Using Ludwig van like that! He can no harm to anyone!
Eventually, the Ludovico technique works well enough on Alex, and he is put on an exhibition of sorts, where he's presented with violent aggressors and a partially nude woman. When Alex feels compelled to retaliate the violence or make a move on the woman, he falls into a state of debilitating nausea and discomfort, which causes him not to act on his urges. Once again, however, the ethical status of the treatment is called into question, this time by an audience member, who questions if Alex is capable of making decisions at all.
Choice! The boy has no real choice, has he? Self-interest. The fear of physical pain drove him to that grotesque act of self-abasement. Its insincerity was clearly to be seen. He ceases to be a wrongdoer. He ceases also to be a creature capable of moral choice.
But morality aside, the technique is successful enough, and Alex is released back into the world, where a Twilight Zone-esque turn of events take place. In a reversal of fortune, and now that he's unable to fight back, Alex becomes the victim of the same acts of violence he used to enact on others. After being beat up by the same elderly man who he attacked in the beginning of the film and his friends, the fight is broken up by two of the former droogs, Georgie and Dim, who have now gotten jobs as police officers. They take out their long pent-up anger on him before leaving him stranded in the woods. Viewing himself as the victim in the situation and desperate for someone to show him some sympathy, Alex happens upon a house in the woods that the viewer soon comes to recognize as the residence of the first couple who was assaulted by Alex and the gang. We learned that the assault was so severe that it led to the death of the woman living in the house and permanently affected her husband, Mr. Alexander. Not yet realizing that Alex is responsible for those actions, but recognizing him as the victim of police brutality and being used as a test dummy by the government, Mr. Alexander, who is a notable author and opponent of the current government's leadership, sees the opportunity to use Alex as a pawn to expose the administration. That is, until he realizes who he's dealing with.
I walked down the lane till I had
When he recognizes Alex's rendition of Singing in the Rain from That One Fateful Night, Mr. Alexander decides to join the club of victims who give Alex a taste of his own medicine. He drugs Alex, locks him in a room, and uses the one thing that he holds sacred against him, Ludwig van Beethoven. Since the Ludovico technique incidentally made Alex averse to the Ninth Symphony, Mr. Alexander blares a score until Alex decides he can't take it anymore and leaps out the window in an attempt to take his own life. In the end, Alex ends up in a hospital, where the window leap seems to have caused a reversal of the Ludovico technique, and he is once again used as a pawn, this time by the very government officials who Mr. Alexander tried to use him against. As press enter the hospital room to capture shots of Alex and the Minister of the Interior, Alex is serenaded with Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and shows no symptoms of aversion, demonstrating his complacency in the societal failures and the overarching hypocrisy of the leadership. While A Clockwork Orange is a clear social commentary on the role of government and society as a whole, it also sets up a philosophical conversation on the subjects of morality, free will, and the nature of good and evil. From the beginning of the film, it's clear that morality, or the lack of morality, plays a large role in A Clockwork Orange. Alex's transformation from a character who treats explicitly immoral actions in a very nonchalant and casual way to being physically incapable of such behavior presents a fascinating case study for the concept of morality, and specifically what makes an action have moral value. According to the utilitarian philosophical perspective of John Stuart Mill, the moral goodness of an action is determined by its consequences. The best actions are those that provide the greatest amount of good, or utility, to the greatest number of people. At face value, this assertion may seem to align with Alex's actions. But, in the beginning of his work on liberty, Mill states that, quote, over himself, over his own mind and body, the individual is sovereign. Even under consequentialist perspectives, sovereignty and free will are critical aspects of creating moral value. The perspective of both John Stuart Mill and the film itself seem to lead to the conclusion that in order to have ethical value, actions must be freely chosen. Without free will, actions have no moral or ethical significance, for decisions themselves rely on having a choice between the right and wrong thing to do. If the decision maker can only actually choose one of the options, there is no real choice to be made. With no real choice to be made, there can be no right or wrong choice. And with no right or wrong choice, there can be no morally good or bad thing to do, thus no moral significance whatsoever. Those responsible for the Ludovico technique even admit their lack of regard for the moral implications of the method.
These are subtleties. We're not concerned with motives, with a higher ethics. We are concerned only with cutting down crime. And with relieving the ghastly congestion in our prisons. He will be your true Christian, ready to turn the other cheek, ready to be crucified rather than crucify, sick to the very heart at the thought even of killing a fly.
But by the end of the film, we find ourselves back in a similar place to where we started. Alex is not only back to feeling his perverted fondness for criminal activities, he's actively being rewarded for such inclinations. Having gone from being punished for his immorality to having his free will removed and being forced to choose what seems like morally good actions, and then ending up being praised for his immorality, A Clockwork Orange seems to suggest that it is better to freely choose immoral actions than to be forced against one's will to conduct morally good actions. All in all, A Clockwork Orange masterfully challenges our perceptions of ethical behavior, human autonomy, and the dichotomy of good and evil through the journey of Alex DeLarge. From his initial portrayal as a charismatic yet violently immoral protagonist to his subjugation under the Ludovico technique, the film explores the intricacies of human choice and moral decision-making. By stripping Alex of his free will and forcing him into a false semblance of virtue, the film's narrative critically examines the true value of coerced morality compared to the freedom to choose, even if that choice results in immoral actions. As the plot develops, the film delves deeper into the paradox of conditioning an individual to behave morally against their will. Through Alex's forced transformation, the viewer is prompted to reflect on the nature of moral decisions and the implications of depriving someone of their autonomy and sovereignty in the name of societal good. The film circles back to a chilling reflection on societal and governmental hypocrisy, with Alex's reversion back to his former compulsions, which are now endorsed by the very government that sought to quote-unquote fix him. This underscores what appears to be the film's central message, that authentic moral value is rooted in free will, and without the freedom to choose, even actions that are perceived as good lose their moral significance. A Clockwork Orange leaves us with the question of whether individual freedoms or societal functionality should be prioritized, and whether it is preferable to possess the autonomy to choose evil or to be deprived of free will in the pursuit of mandated virtue. The Kubrick film has been incredibly controversial and leaves a lasting impression on its viewers with its provocative narrative that challenges the audience's perception of virtue, free will, and the true nature of good and evil in society.